so many things that can go wrong, and I'm really, really looking forward to this talk. So please give it away and give a round of applause in the chat maybe to Schepp.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in Zurich, even if it's just virtual. So I'm Schepp. I'm a freelance web developer, front-end developer from Düsseldorf, Germany. And today I want to tell you a few things about images, things you didn't know so far, maybe, hopefully. And I'll cover all sorts of areas, markup, CSS, JavaScript, and even formats. And let's go.
So the quality is great.
Perfect.
Nice.
Okay, so the first thing you might not know is that there's another tag that you can also use for images, and this tag is, or this element is the image element, which is pretty weird. So basically, it's an alias to the normal image element. And it works the same way as the one that is just abbreviated. Why does it exist? Nobody knows really. So it's just there. Some people think it's at the beginning of HTML, somebody implemented it, and then people had to make sure that future browsers are always compatible to it. But MDN advises you not to use it. But what is it good for? So one thing that it was good for was the time when modern browsers supporting old IEs were still not supporting SVG. Somebody got the nice idea to create a fallback mechanism with the image element. And you can see it here in action. So what it does is, since SVG officially supports the image element, and the image element is a valid element in SVG, you could use it inside an SVG, and you would point to another SVG inside that like container SVG, and the browsers that would understand SVG and therefore the image element would show an SVG graphic. The old browsers that didn't know what SVG meant were just ignoring SVG, and they were evaluating the image element, but then looking at the source attribute, and there you had a PNG fallback for them to show, and it worked perfectly. But so nowadays, this is totally useless unless you want to bypass HTML filters, maybe. But I'm sure you don't want to do that because it's against the code of conduct. Okay, up to the next thing. Second, this is about the alt tag. Oh, sorry, alt attribute, of course. So the as you all know, if you use images on the web, you always need to use an alt attribute. Attribute can be just decorative element. It needs to be set. And we can so here's our file. We do have an image with an alt attribute, and the document is valid. If we remove the alt attribute and we revalidate, then we see it's not valid anymore. And if we put in an empty alt attribute, it's valid again. Fine. But maybe you didn't know that you can also use a title attribute, and that works as well. So here you have an image element which doesn't have an alt attribute, but has a title attribute. and that's valid as well. It doesn't mean that it's a good idea to do it that way, but it's at least valid HTML. What also works is using a fig caption. So here you can see that we have a figure element with the image, with no alt attribute, and the fig caption describing what's displayed in the figure, and that's valid as well. And then there's I think the longest attribute ever to be invented in HTML, and that's generator unable to provide required alt. And this attribute is meant to be used when images are inserted by machines and they just cannot set the alt attribute. Then they can like mark these images as machine generated, and yeah, that's basically the use case for that. So the interesting question is, does the validator know about it? And the validator doesn't know about it, so it will throw an error. You can find the link to the spec with the attribute over here. After loading images or preloading images usually and afterwards you assign the image a source, and that source gets loaded, and then this whole mechanism gets triggered. And once you append an image to the DOM, what happens is that it needs to be decoded first. So the whole browser needs to stop for a certain amount of time, which is maybe just a few milliseconds, but for a bigger image, it can be longer time. And then the image gets decoded and finally rendered, and then the browser can proceed with what the browser does. But what many people do not know is that there's a new method, a promise-based method, which is decode. So you can create a new image, assign a source, and then you run the decode method, after which, once the decode is done, you append it to the DOM. And the advantage is that the decode happens on a separate thread and will not impact your main thread. And only after that, the image will appear in the main thread by being appended to the DOM. One other nice trick with the decode method is that you can also use it to feature detect support for image formats. So as usual with promise-based APIs, you do have a then and a catch. And let's say, for example, you want to check if the browser can decode a WebP image. If it's resolving the promise, then it's able to decode the image. If it rejects, then you know, okay, I need to revert to a Jpeg, for example. So the fourth chapter is about pseudo elements. So you probably know that images are replaced elements, and as such, you cannot use pseudo elements or you cannot generate content within replaced elements. As you can see here, I tried to create an after pseudo element within that image, which is just a rectangle or square in red. And it doesn't show up here because it's just not possible. But what happens if the image cannot be loaded? Suddenly, you can use pseudo elements and they appear inside, and you can use this to style images which are broken in a nicer way than the way they are usually styled. And if the image loads, then everything is back to normal. I use this technique, for example, for native image lazy loading, because I've seen that at the beginning of such a loading progress, the image shows this broken image thing. So it looks like this, and that makes this moment nicer to look at. 5. Custom properties. They're nice, but they are also a little bit dumb, because what looks like a number is really just a string, basically. Sometimes we can use it or convert it into a number-like context. But in the end, it's just a number. So we cannot animate that property, because the browser doesn't know that it could interpolate between, for example, 0 and 1. Luckily, there's the CSS Properties and Values API that is coming in under the umbrella of the Houdini API. And that allows us to register a custom property via JavaScript as a certain type. In this case, we are registering this multiply custom property as a number. And what the browser is now enabled to animate that number, because it knows that it's a number and how to work with it. So we can create a keyframe animation where we animate from 0 to 1. And then we can use this custom property to animate, for example, a background image in form of a conic gradient, and that way creating, for example, pie charts. What we can also do is we can create CSS-only image slideshows by also using the forgotten WebKit crossfade CSS function, which fades between two image sources in an amount in percentages. And soon this will also be possible to declare in pure CSS. And finally, 6. 6 is about animated image formats. As we all know, if we want an animation to show up, animated GIFs have us covered. But they're also a little bit shitty. So they have only a limited color support. They only offer 1-bit transparency support, which means they can just mark certain pixels as transparent or not transparent, but not like half transparent. And they have huge file sizes. How about animated PNGs? So PNGs can also be animated, and then they are called a PNG, and they are supported in every modern browser. They offer 24 bits of colors, so basically the full color spectrum. They also offer 8-bit transparency, meaning like soft transparency. Problem is they are even bigger than GIFs, so that's a big drawback. But at least now you know they exist, and maybe you can use them on a local project. Then there's Motion JPEG, which is a super old video format. And basically what it does is it's a sequence of JPEG images which are being streamed from a server with like little markers in between that that tell the browser that the current frame has finished and the next frame is about to start. They are supported in every browser as well. They offer full color depth. They don't have any transparency, so you need to work with CSS blend modes if you want to put them in transparent over other things. They have okayish file sizes, a little smaller than GIF, but at least with more colors. The drawback is that they always need to be streamed as multi-part JPEG sequence from a server. So that's not just putting a file on the server and then it's fine. You need some mechanic on top of it. But WebP can be animated as well. And WebP is soon to be supported in almost every browser. I think I should be updating this slide because with the new Edge browser, it's supported in every browser, every modern browser. It offers full colors, nice transparency, and okayish file sizes. Sadly, it's oh wait, that's a problem. I guess it's not supported in Safari. Okay. Sharing gone. Okay, sorry. Very sorry. Okay, so that's animated WebP, better than the ones before. So we have a winner probably, which is, oh wait, we've forgotten about videos. Because there's H.264 videos in image elements, which you can use in Safari. You have full color depth support, no transparency, sadly, but you would have in WebM video. You have very small file sizes, which is nice. One problem is that being able to use a video in an image element is currently only supported in Safari. But then there's one more image format, which is AV1, which is the most recent video format. And the big advantage of AV1 over H.264 is that it's the next generation video format. It's backed by all of the browser vendors. It's royalty-free in contrast to H.264. Since it's newer, it has a better image compression. I don't know about transparency. I haven't really seen anything about that. Could be, maybe not. Currently, Chrome and Firefox already have it implemented. Safari not yet. But there's a polyfill for Safari. And here are all the different moving image file formats in comparison. We can see how much of an advantage the video formats are. Bringing all of this together, if you want to cover all the browsers with animate with the best possible animated format, then you can use this picture element, and every browser will get the best possible quality. And that's it. Thank you for joining us. The slides are already at this URL. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm the Schepp. I tweet in English. We have a new online CSS